Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Trade war or economic revolution? The battle over U.S. tariffs is taking a new turn. U.S. President Donald Trump has unveiled a new wave of tariffs targeting some 100 countries and trading blocs. Now, while some countries will face a 10% baseline tariff, the European Union will be hit with a 20% rate. Standing in the Rose Garden of the White House, Trump also announced a 25% tariff on all foreign-made vehicles.
But such horrendous imbalances have devastated our industrial base and put our national security at risk. I don't blame these other countries at all for this calamity. I blame former presidents and past leaders who weren't doing their job. They let it happen, and they let it happen to an extent that nobody can even believe. That's why, effective at midnight, we will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles. Starting tomorrow, the United States will implement reciprocal tariffs on other nations. It's been a long time since we even thought of that. We used to think about it a lot. We didn't think about it for many decades, and you see what's happened. For nations that treat us badly, we will calculate the combined rate of all their tariffs, non-monetary barriers, and other forms of cheating. And because we are being very kind, we're kind people, very kind. So if you look at that, China, first row, China, 67%. That's tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So 67%, I think you can, for the most part, see it. At the same time, we will establish a minimum baseline tariff of 10%. You notice that on the chart. And that'll be on other countries to help rebuild our economy and to prevent cheating. Terminate your own tariffs, drop your barriers, don't manipulate your currencies. They manipulate their currencies like nobody can even believe, which is a bad, bad thing and very devastating to us. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now let's look into some of the responses to those tariffs, starting with commentary by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, in the early hours of Thursday morning. The leader said that the European Union is preparing for further countermeasures against the new wave of U.S. tariffs.
We have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses if negotiations fail. We will also be watching closely what indirect effects these tariffs could have, because we cannot absorb global overcapacity, nor will we accept dumping on our markets. And Europe will stand at the side of those directly impacted. We have already announced new measures to support the steel and cars sectors. Last week, we limited the amount of steel that can be imported to Europe tariff-free. This will give more breathing space to these strategic industries. Now, we will also convene strategic dialogues with the steel, the automotive and the pharmaceutical sectors, and others will follow. Europe stands together.
The European Union Central Asia Summit is kicking off Thursday in the city of Samarkand in Uzbekistan. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has said that she expects the meeting to help take the EU Central Asia partnership to the next level. And now let's move on to more reactions to the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump, and they're coming in from all over the European Union. Among the first to share their opinions on the new levies were Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, along with his Swedish and Italian counterparts.
It is free enterprise and free competition that have laid the foundation for the prosperity of the West. That is why Americans can listen to music on Swedish Spotify and we Swedes can listen to the same music on American iPhones. Therefore, I deeply regret that the US has now embarked on a path where it wants to restrict trade through increased tariffs. Full support for the EU Commission in trade negotiations with the US. Trade is a powerful engine of global prosperity. The EU will remain the staunch advocate for free and fair trade. We will engage with all our partners and continue to strengthen and expand our trade network. Now is the time to ratify the agreements with Mercosur, Mexico, and decisively advance in the negotiations with India and other key partners.
The introduction by the US of tariffs against the European Union is a measure that I consider to be wrong and not in the interests of either party. We will do everything we can to work on an agreement with the United States, with the aim of averting a trade war that would inevitably weaken the West in favor of other global players. In any case, as always, we will act in the interests of Italy and its economy, including by engaging with our other European partners.
Needed. It is free enterprise and free competition that have laid the foundation for the prosperity of the West. That is why Americans can listen to music on Swedish Spotify and we Swedes can listen to the same music on American iPhones. Therefore, I deeply regret that the US has now embarked on a path where it wants to restrict trade through increased tariffs. Full support for the EU Commission in trade.
We are now turning to the Polish capital in Warsaw, where European ministers of defense are slowly arriving for an informal summit. Now, the ministers' gathering at the Warsaw Citadel is set to focus on future support for Kyiv and the European Union's role in securing a lasting peace in Ukraine. At 9 o'clock Central European Time, the officials will discuss an initiative by Kaja Kallas meant to strengthen the Ukrainian army. The proposal involves sending Kyiv 2 million rounds of large caliber ammunition worth some 5 billion euros by the end of the year. The agenda of today's meeting is also going to include a working lunch on the white paper for European defense, which provides the EU with a roadmap for rearmament of the bloc. Increased defense investment will be the key item on the agenda of today's NATO Foreign Ministers Summit in Brussels. Apart from expanding defense budgets, the officials are set to discuss the war in Ukraine and relations with partners from the Indo-Pacific region. In a statement preceding the summit, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said that the meeting will focus on strengthening the alliance's collective defense, adding that it remains the foundation of NATO and the pact's top priority. Now, the summit will also include a meeting with Ukraine's Foreign Minister, Andriy Sybiha, and discussions with EU High Representative Kaja Kallas. The European Union Central Asia Summit is kicking off Thursday in the city of Samarkand in Uzbekistan. President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen said she expects the meeting to help take the EU Central Asia partnership to the next level. Now, the summit gathers Central Asian and EU leaders, including EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa. Now, the event signals political commitment from both regions to deepening and strengthening their partnership. The European Council expressed its geopolitical interest in intensifying bilateral engagement between the regions. The summit offers space to hold bilateral meetings and will center around shared priorities such as security, trade, and investment. The program also includes an international climate forum to be held on April 4. A good minerals deal would be good for everybody, said former U.S. Ambassador to Poland, Daniel Fried, speaking to TVP World. Now, the comment comes as the U.S. and Ukraine are still negotiating a rare earth minerals deal, which Ukraine received a new draft of on Friday.
A good minerals deal would be good for everybody. The deal that was supposed to be signed on February 28th, that was the day that the Trump-Zelensky meeting blew up in the Oval Office. That agreement was actually very good. It was a solid piece of work. The draft agreement that the Americans have sent the Ukrainians, it's been published, is much longer, much more complicated, and appears to be unbalanced. That is, it gives the Americans a lot of power. It doesn't give the Ukrainians as much, and it gives the U.S. and U.S. companies right of first refusal for a lot of projects. The Ukrainians should continue to negotiate. The idea of some kind of U.S.-Ukrainian cooperation on development of its natural resources is a pretty good idea. That is, it gives Donald Trump a stake in Ukraine in his terms.
The road to the presidential elections in Poland is about a month and a half away, and the stakes are high. Now, if an opponent of the ruling coalition wins, that could spell trouble for the policies of Prime Minister Donald Tusk. But if the Tusk-aligned candidate becomes victorious, the ruling coalition might be able to deliver on the promises it made in the general election of 2023. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Daman, breaks down the details.
The stakes are high in Poland's presidential race for the governing coalition, who have centrist frontrunner Rafał Trzaskowski on their ticket. That's because Prime Minister Donald Tusk has been in a paralysing cohabitation with current President Andrzej Duda ever since he won the general election in 2023. In fact, many of the Civic Coalition's promised reforms have been stonewalled by Duda's edicts.
The president's most powerful prerogative is a negative one. It's the fact that they've got this veto, which, you need a 3/5 majority to overturn, which most governments don't have. The current government doesn't have it.
For more than a year and a half, Tusk has struggled to make inroads, including on overhauling the judiciary stacked by the previous administration. Young people and women, many of whom voted for the coalition, have also been left disappointed around social issues such as abortion and civil partnerships. Trzaskowski is promising that will change.
I am convinced that will finally make this medieval anti-abortion law go away. Dear ladies and gentlemen, women's rights are the most important thing for all of us.
But will a Trzaskowski presidency really unlock Tusk's agenda from one day to the next?
It's going to be very complicated to get things done in the parliament, and they're going to lose the excuse of not voting things through because of Andrzej Duda, the current president. So there is a hope of sort of recalibrating this government.
On the other side of the aisle, the answer is more certain, with both Karol Nawrocki of the Law and Justice Party and Sławomir Mencen of the far-right Confederation set to stall and try cast their own influence on the legislative agenda. The pair have been neck and neck for second place in the polls, but the libertarian Mencen, who's been drawing in young voters with Russian narratives, talked, then tanked last week after an interview on YouTube in which he dismissed abortion even in the case of rape and called for paid university studies.
I am deeply convinced that one cannot kill an innocent child, even if that child is in some ways connected to an unpleasantness. I believe that we would achieve a higher level of education when universities introduce a tuition fee.
Those close to Nawrocki's campaign have revealed to TVP World there are internal discussions over whether he should start specifically targeting young people and women, or focus on consolidating the far right, especially in the second round. Many still expect Trzaskowski and Nawrocki to finish in the top two on May 18 before they head into a final face-off on the 1st of June.
It's a hugely consequential election, probably one of the most important that there's been since 1989. It'll determine what the rest of the government's term, which is set to run till autumn 27, is going to be like. If it loses the election, it'll be completely hamstrung for the rest of its term of office, and the political dynamic that it could set off could even force an early election.
A nervous wait for the government ahead of a new resident in the presidential palace. Aaron Daman, TVP World.
And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for World Talks up next.